Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I rise to make some points today on the Summary Offences Amendment Decriminalisation of Public Drunkenness Bill 2020. Basically, this is a bill to decriminalise public drunkenness, and clearly that is something we'd all agree to want to improve and make sure we can have a society that has less problems from people being drunk in public and causing problems. The challenge I see is that we haven't got an alternative for the police, who now have the responsibility of the safety of our community, and when somebody's playing a bit of havoc, when they've got too much alcohol on board and are not taking responsibility or unable to take responsibility for their behaviours because of the effects of alcohol, we currently have a police force that are able to assist. Now, I worked for a long time in health, and I absolutely understand the health aspects of this issue. I also understand that the driver for this change came from the deaths in custody report from some years ago. Clearly, it's an issue that we never want to see anybody dying in custody, and what we need to do is give the police and the health professionals the resources and tools to be able to address this. What I don't see in this legislation is exactly that. I don't see an alternative model developed to deal with people who are needing to sober up. And I don't see alternative powers given to the police to be able to do something in the situation, such as happened in New South Wales when they brought this law in of public drunkenness. They also enacted the Move On laws. Now, at this point in time, I feel that the police are feeling very frustrated. My brother and I both started in our professions around the same time. He became a policeman, I became a nurse, and clearly those two professions are often interrelate when you've got, when you're in an accident emergency, and you've got the police in there with you sometimes when you need it. Anyway, so I have a close relationship with his career and his mates and his friends, and I went out to the police, particularly his friends and my friends as well, I suppose, and the local police, obviously, having grown up in the area. Not that I've ever had any need to know the police professionally, but having worked in accident emergency, you certainly get to know the police. So I actually asked a few what their thoughts were on this, because I think they're the ones who are going to be left dealing with the situation. And I just want to read to you, because I thought one of the responses I got from a policeman was really captured their concern and demonstrates that there isn't for them an understanding. They haven't been consulted. They don't know what the alternative is for them. So I'll just read it. It says, "Hi Roma, I see you wanted the police's view of the proposed drunk legislation. As a supervisor, I see a huge risk that having a drunk in our cell poses on us as police members. They may fall and hit their head, or they may self-asphyxiate, or they may be that angry they act out with self-harm or hitting their head against the wall. Proposing it to be a health issue in itself, I don't disagree with, and I would love the risk to be taken away from me as a supervisor. But in saying that, at what cost? What powers will we have to remove the drunk off the street before they assault someone, potentially kill someone, walk out in front of a car, killing themselves, leaving others traumatised? It's not an easy solution. When we lock someone up, it's not just because they're drunk. If they've got someone to look after them at home, we will more than likely take them there. The trouble is the aggressive ones who haven't committed a crime yet, but likely will if left on the street, or those that are just too much risk themselves, are the ones we need to lock up to sober up. If this is replaced with a sobering up centre, who looks after them? Can they just leave and go back to where the same issue will present? And in regional areas where there is only one response unit, will they be tied up being a security guard at a hospital, etc.? At the end of the day, to me, as much as I don't want to be locking up and looking after drunks before decriminalising, there needs to be a feasible option to replace it in order to keep the community safe. In my opinion, drunks on the streets will only make our job harder and the community less safe. And I think that really captures it. Now, in my community, I've been very involved with the Aboriginal groups through South West Coast over a 20-year period. And it's my experience that There are very good relationships between the Aboriginal communities and the ACCHOs, the Community Controlled Health Organisations, of which I was employed as the nurse for one, and the police. And it's the elders and relationships that we fostered that, we get calls, and I wouldn't personally, but the families would get calls, and somebody was always there. It's one of the features of the Framlingham Aboriginal community was there was always a home that someone could go to, because it was a very communal living environment, obviously coming from the background of being a mission, and it's still affectionately called the Mish by the community there. But the reality is that over the time where we've had problems 20 years ago, when that report and that situation we started talking as a health community, how are we going to address this? We developed relationships, and the police do a very good job, and the Aboriginal community does a very good job. Often the guy or woman who's pretty drunk isn't too happy at that situation, but eventually it all works out for the best. And the police don't want people in cells, like they've just stated through that policeman who I just quoted and read you his response. So having a public drunkenness removed without an alternative just doesn't add up. I had a personal experience when I first started in Parliament. I went to the CEO sleep out in 2016, and we were trying to raise money for homelessness. And I'd never, hadn't been down to the city much. I just went along with, my sleeping bag and a piece of cardboard they gave you. And interestingly, the professional protesters came along and started beating on drums, yelling, screaming, and actually causing havoc. It was actually very confronting for me. It was very confronting. I had my son with me. I had the member for Caulfield, David Southwick, and I had the member for Kew. We all camped out together. And we had the governor there as well, and she had to be removed because it got so dangerous. And the police, I felt really sorry for, because there were only 15 on duty that night in the city, and it was the Friday night, and 4 of them were only able to be brought down to us. But because they had no move-on laws, which, as the member for Caulfield, thank you, pointed out in his presentation, they could do nothing. And so they stood there, 4 guys standing there, and I was laying down. I had people kicking me. They went up to my son and said, no, they said to me, that's right, I'll bet you're ashamed of yourself. I bet your children are ashamed of you because you're a big CEO. They didn't even know. And I said, well, there's my son over there, go and ask him. They were just really horrible, and there was nothing the police could do. It really opened my eyes to the fact that the people who keep us safe, the police, women and men, they've got to be given the tools to do that job, or they just get frustrated and they get disheartened. And I feel today this law is doing that again. It's idealistic in that we want to get rid of drunkenness on the street. But what do? What's the alternative? Where are the sobering up centres? Who's going to cart people to them? Who's going to supervise them? I mean, usually in accident and emergency, you've got someone who's drank so much that, you actually have to do some removing of the contents of the gut so that it doesn't absorb into the bloodstream further. So, you need a health response. You need tools, and you need the police working together and the families. And look, I get the fact that we all want to work together to remove public drunkenness. That's fair. But you don't put the cart before the horse. You have the sobering up centres like other states. You have the move-on laws. You give the tools to the professionals who you're asking to deal with this. Don't do what I saw happen in 2016 when those police were getting abused by people because they were doing nothing. They just stood there, and I could see the frustration on their face. And it was that moment that I realised we ask a lot from our police, but unless we give them the tools and the resources to actually do their role, all we're doing is getting frustrated men and women who want to look after the community but simply can't because we're letting them down in a legislative sense. And that's exactly what I'm seeing here with these this piece of legislation, which has no solution associated with it. It's just decriminalising drunkenness, but at the end of the day, I don't think the mums and the dads whose child needs to be supported with the professionals when they're that drunk. We'll be grateful if we don't give another alternative.